Thank you. I'm not used to standing behind a podium, but I kind of have to do it because the technology isn't quite right. And I'm going to have to fake it just a little bit. But that's the nature of technology. I am very fond of saying I hate software because it never seems to work. We call it the demo sensor. Whenever you go to give a demo, the demo sensor's on and it says, this ain't going to work. It never fails. It never fails. I picked a topic tonight. I kept trying to get some idea of my audience. And since no one could exactly tell me what my audience was going to be because they said, we don't really know, it's going to be a little bit of a mixture, so it's maybe a little random, and I hope that's okay with you. I rewrote what I was going to say, though, in 45 minutes that I spent with President Perry as we discussed what you all are doing here at Eastern with the entrepreneurial program. And I commend you for what you're trying to do. He mentioned that you're actually the first in the state. Would that be accurate? Is what you meant? First in the state or region, or which? In the region. It's great to be first. We were the first, and I'll talk a little bit, I think, about the importance of things like that. We're the leading, we're the best, we're the first. But I asked the guys who work for me, I said, what should I talk about when I go up there? I give a talk regularly to students and to other entrepreneurs, which I gave today to the students. And so I felt really, really comfortable with that one. But this one, not so much so. So I had a couple extra glasses of wine, and that should help with what comes out, because I have no idea what's going to come out. But I wanted to talk about my guys, they said, what you should talk about is fanaticism. And that sounds really kind of crazy a little bit, but all entrepreneurial efforts really require a certain amount of fanaticism. And being the first, trying to figure out how do we teach entrepreneurism requires a certain amount of fanaticism, because great products, great services, great classes, great programs are only put together by fanatics. People who care so much about something, they care so much about the impact that they want to have on someone. They focus on every tiny detail, and they ask questions that haven't perhaps been asked before. And trying to teach entrepreneurism is a challenge, because how do you take a weird guy like me, who has all kinds of weird things going on inside of them because I'm an entrepreneur, and how do you foster that? How do you bring that to something useful? And it requires a certain amount of fanaticism. And I won't get it exactly right, but George Bernard Shaw, I think, said that the reasonable man is always trying to fit the world to themselves. The unreasonable man is always trying to fit. No, I'm sorry, the other way around. The reasonable man always is trying to fit into the world, make himself fit the world, whereas the unreasonable man is always trying to make the world fit them. So all progress is dependent upon the unreasonable man. And there's some truth to that, isn't there? That progress often comes from crazy ideas. Solving a really difficult problem comes from a crazy idea. So your effort here, I'm I'm very enthusiastic about, because I love to work with other entrepreneurs. I never refuse, I shouldn't say never, but I almost never refuse a request from an entrepreneur who says, boy, I'd really love to bounce my ideas off of you, and I'm having a certain number of problems, and would you meet with me? And I always will meet with them for coffee or tea or lunch or breakfast or something. One, because I love to hear new ideas and meet new people and network, but there's just something about, I also really love to give back. I love to be able to share my experiences and see if I can help in some way. And it's exciting that you were doing that. I am an Eastern Illinois grad, as it was mentioned, and it occurred to me this past week that it was 40 years ago that I was here, and I don't feel that old, you know. I don't feel that old. I don't know where the time went by, and all you young people, the same thing will happen to you. It's a blink, isn't it? We grow up and it's a blink. When I look back and the opportunities that I've had, I am incredibly grateful to be at what was at the right place at the right time with the right idea. And in my case, I only had one really good idea in my life, and I've now used it 3 times. So you can keep, it's okay if you only have one good idea. You can keep using it over and over and over again. I wasn't going to do this, but Renee, my wife, said, oh, they really liked the commercial. Because today in the class, I ended with a commercial. So tonight, I'm going to start off with the commercial about what is cantata. And hopefully my technology is set up, because I had to do this really, really quick. Let's see. There we go.
Here's your reminder for today at 4 p.m. Okay, I'll remind you.
I'm real proud of the group. I have an in-house group that did that, and it's a phenomenal piece of work, using amazing technology that's available today to anybody to do that kind of thing. I don't get paid to do this, so I had to give that little crass commercial message. I apologize, and you're welcome to go to cantata.com and sign up for our coming release of the product. It really is going to be something very, very special. And as you watch something like that, it's really I watch it and I continue to be amazed. I'm using that product. I've been using it for months. It's not yet being used by the public, but we have in the company what we call cantata moments, where we're using something, we're doing something, and we realize just how cool that is, what just happened. Software is very hard to do. It's very hard to do. Whether you like it or don't like it, I'm fascinated by the government.gov, the Obamacare.gov disaster. And from a just purely software standpoint, as I read about what they were doing, it was clear that there was no one in charge. Because you can't produce something like this without someone with a single vision and the authority and the power to say, no, this is the way you're going to do it. And no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. But we are going to do this. And what you say no to is much more important often than what you say yes to. And they said yes to pretty much everything. And when I read the kinds of things that they need to do to fix it by the end of November, just as a software guy, not a chance. Not a chance. And again, I'm not saying it's good or bad, whether you like the law or not, it doesn't really matter. Just purely from a software standpoint, that project had no chance. It had no chance of succeeding, even though they had three and a half years. The way that was organized, what they were trying, the scope of the project, they had no chance. They especially had no chance to produce something great. Great products, great programs, great services, great anything is produced by fanatics. That we've been working on for 2 years. That, in comparison to Obamacare.gov, is trivial. That is trivial compared to the task that they bit off. And it really had no chance of succeeding. It has no chance of making it by the end of November. Forget about it. If what the reports are of what they're trying to do are true, purely from a software standpoint, having done this for 30 years, not a chance. And I feel sorry for them. It's bad for all of us. So, now that I've introduced the politically incorrect stuff, too bad. Fanatics. You know, like I said, great products are only built by fanatics, typically in a garage. I stole that from Esther Dyson, who is a pundit way back when. And she made the point that you don't see great products come out of IBM anymore. You don't see great products come out from Bell Labs. You don't see great products come out from Microsoft. You just don't. Even Google, now that they're getting so big, they're having difficulties coming out with great products. As companies get big, it's harder and harder to produce a great program. The only way you can do a great anything is to set off a small group and say, you're free to do whatever you got to do to make this great. And somebody there has to be a fanatic that sits around and does this and figures it all out. And not, this shows one person. It's almost never one person. It's never one person. It's a team that figures everything out, down to every little detail. Education. As I thought about what I was going to say tonight, and people have asked me, I gave a talk 2 weeks ago, and I got asked the question, the things that you talk about being the qualities of being an entrepreneur, can you teach that? And I said, I don't know. And that's the challenge that you have. Can you take things that are qualitative, qualities, and teach those things? You're used to teaching law. Okay, it's got these certain number of case. Okay, if you learn these cases, you kind of got a good grasp of the law. Accounting. If you could figure out how LIFO and FIFO works, and which I never could, how does a P&L statement? How does a balance sheet, how does a cash flow statement work together? You can do that. You can teach that if someone is interested in learning. But entrepreneurship, there's some qualities about entrepreneurship that, how do you teach that? I like to say that, entrepreneurship is kind of like the spirit of the pirate, just I can do anything, and I can go anywhere, and I can, rob from anybody. I could do something, I'm confident. Well, how do you teach that confidence? And so there's that spirit of a pirate, but on the other side, there is the ability to execute like the Navy SEALs. Navy SEALs are taught how to execute, amazing things. I sure am glad that they're on our side. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the movies that have been produced about Navy SEALs, the documentaries. 250 or so people, men, who are specially selected. They're the best of the best from every military group. 250 of them enter, and about 20 of them on average make it through. So, that brings up a question. Do you let anybody into your entrepreneur program? Do you let just anybody? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But if you're worried about the outcome, and the Navy SEALs sure are, they know what they want those 20 people to know how to do. They worry about the 250 that they invite to be in the program. How will your entrepreneurial program be judged 10 years from now, 20 years from now? How do you want to judge it? What is the criteria that you're using to judge your program? And I didn't quite pick up on it until just a little while ago that you're using the word sustainable. Sustainable, that you're focused on sustainable energy, things that are sustainable. And I think that I wish I'd have known that before, because it would have helped me, because I'm a tech guy. I think tech, I think software, I think gadgets and stuff. And so sustainable is something I'm not terribly familiar with. But here, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And it's great that you have picked a specialty, because specializing in something is far easier than trying to be all things to all people. You can't be all things to all people. But you have to ask your question, 20 years from now, what would we be proud of? When we taught 37 people who started 37 companies in this sustainable arena, and they produced 100,000 jobs, 300,000 jobs. They invented things that have never been invented before. I think it's a huge mistake for government to try to pick, to get behind projects in the green energy, because it ain't those people. It isn't a government deciding, okay, this company, Solyndra, they're going to do it, and then Solyndra goes bankrupt. No. If the right conditions exist, several entrepreneurs will start companies in an arena when the economics are right, and when the technology reaches a certain place, they will do it. It will get done, but only when the conditions are right, and you can't create those conditions. You can't make it up. So I think it's a mistake for government to try to do it. I'll give you an example. The Wright brothers, aviation, they had a competitor. I can't remember his name, but he worked for the Smithsonian Institute, and he was given a grant of $50,000 by the government to learn how to fly, to create aviation. I wish I could remember his name. I apologize. I got it in my notes, but I can't see my notes because of the way this is working. But the Wright brothers were entrepreneurs. And interesting when you read how they became the kind of people that they were fanatics. And they had been fanatics about other things before they were fanatical about learning how to fly and aviation. And they together had compiled the largest body, essentially the largest library of information about aviation. And they did it totally on their own, only because they were fanatics. And yet there was this one guy who was a really smart guy, really interested in aviation, and he was given a team, and he was given $50,000, which at that time was a lot of money. And so he was trying to figure out, we're going to put something in the air. And the Wright brothers beat him. And as soon as the Wright brothers knew about him, they knew they were competing. So they were rushing to get their thing out, and they didn't have any money, but they figured out a way to do it. They did it anyway. They beat him, and as soon as they did it, that guy quit. Said, okay, it's been done. I'm out of here. He quit. There's something. What's that quality? How do you teach that quality? I think it can be encouraged. I think it can be fostered. I think there are elements of it that you can teach, especially the part like execution, like they teach the Navy SEALs. You can teach how to execute, but do you look somehow for qualities to even allow certain students into your program? I don't know. It's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to it. I don't even know if you're allowed to do that. Maybe you can't do that. I don't know. Maybe you got to let everybody in that wants to get in. I don't know. But if I was worried about an outcome, I'd be worried about who am I bringing into the program? Well, what are some of the, I wanted to talk about teachers. How many teachers in here? Okay. This is an article that I loved. I don't know if you saw it in the Wall Street Journal. Why tough teachers get good results. You know, there's been this trend for decades now about education and, we want to, we want to foster self-esteem and we don't want to make people feel bad. But damn it, do we teach them anything? I think back on the teachers that I had that impacted me. They were the ones who were hard. This is a guy who, as it says, he called his students idiots. This guy would get fired today. I mean, he could not be allowed to teach. And yet when he died, all of his students from everywhere came to his funeral. They loved him because he forced them to learn music. He smacked their fingers because they didn't hold the violin right. Well, why do I know algebra? I know algebra. I can sit down and do a spreadsheet and I can do algebra. The only reason I knew algebra because I was scared to death not to learn algebra. I had a teacher. I went to Catholic boys high school, Assumption High School down in East St. Louis. And I had a teacher, Brother O'Mara. He beat people up. Valedictorian sitting right next door to me. He got beat up. He'd teach you today, give you homework, you come back in, first 5 minutes there's a quiz, and he'd walk around and he'd look over your shoulder. Sullivan, why don't you know? Why don't you know that? I taught that to you yesterday. You had a homework. What's wrong with you? Slap you upside the head. I mean, I got to where, I would take my quizzes like this. I wouldn't let him see it. I was scared to death not to learn algebra. Now I'm not condoning that. I'm really not. But there's a quality there, that he cared so much. He was offended that you didn't learn algebra. He was offended. He cared so much. And, the teachers that impacted me were teachers like that, like Brother O'Mara. I had 2 courses here at Eastern that really impacted me that I still remember. One, not in my discipline, anatomy. We had an anatomy teacher. I can't even remember his name. I wish I could. But he was passionate and he was interesting and he really wanted you to learn anatomy. And I loved it. I've always loved life sciences. health stuff, but I loved it. There was something about him that he made it so interesting. He cared. He was passionate. He was a fanatic. There's something about that fanatic quality. And, the thing about fanaticism, it can be used for good, it can be used for bad, and we can all think of both sides. But to impact somebody, to make a difference, it requires fanaticism. To care so much. I had a teacher in 5th grade, Mrs. Finley. And I guess I'm just a curious person. But we learned about an acre. There's 43,560 square feet an acre. I just know that because of what happened. I was sitting there thinking, an acre, a square acre. Well, and I asked the question, Mrs. Finley, how many, if you're going to have a true square acre, if each side was equal, how many would it be? Well, she said, to do that, to know the answer to that, you'd have to learn how to do square roots. I said, well, just give me the answer. No, learn how to do square roots. So as a 5th grader, I got a high school math book, and I taught myself how to do square roots. Now today I just got my calculator out, and I'd have had the answer right like that. It's 208.7135572, something like that. Okay. So 208 feet, 0.7 on each side would give you a square. Now, why was I curious about that? I don't know. Just a goofball. But what a great teacher. She wouldn't give me the answer. She said, go learn it. And for whatever reason, I went and did it. I had another teacher here in Eastern who taught business. It was a computer simulation class. Simulating a business. You do the business plans. I mean, so people got to think through, what would I put in a business? How do I do a business plan? Well, this was a simulation class where you were in control of all kinds of variables and stuff. And I absolutely just loved it. It was a wonderful, and he was a great teacher, very passionate. He was a fanatic about doing it. And I became a fanatic about winning. I wanted to be the one who won. And in my team, we won. Although it turned out to be, I was the only one. Everybody just said, I'll just let Sullivan do it. And they went to Mother's or Sporty's or wherever they went. So, being a great teacher has something to do with being a fanatic, impacting kids in a great way. Now, so what are some of the qualities? Malcolm Gladwell, and where's a clock that, I don't even know what time it is. I got till 9:30, don't I? Something like that. So what are the qualities? Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called David and Goliath. It's fresh out. Malcolm Gladwell writes some interesting books. The good thing about his books, you only have to read the first 50 pages. You don't have to read the last 150 because he gets it done in 50 pages. But there must be something about you got to put 200 pages out for it to be a book. But he talked about 3 characteristics of being an entrepreneur. Now, how do you teach these things? The first one was openness. Open to new ideas. Open. The second one was conscientiousness. They show up. They do what they say. How do you teach that? How do you foster conscientiousness? Disagreeable. Now, disagreeable isn't that they're in arguments all the time, but they think they're able to hold a contrarian opinion and argue a contrarian opinion. Those are the 3 qualities that psychologists have found that entrepreneurs need to be pretty good at. So how do you teach that? I don't know. Figure it out. I don't know. I'm not going to talk about that. This is another one. How do you teach this? But it's one of the most critical things. No matter what it is you do, a service, a class, a course, a program, software product, an iPhone, a Macintosh, attention to detail. You know, Steve Jobs, I loved reading the biography on him. I haven't seen the film yet, but I will. You know, the great thing about him was his attention to detail. For the most part, he was really a jerk. He was really a jerk. But this made him something special. And the products that he created were something special. But it was all about the attention to detail. So this is a quality. How do you teach attention to detail? I don't know. But it's a requirement. People need to have that. There isn't an entrepreneur alive who hasn't had to live these three things. And they're different. They mean something, they a little bit the same, but they're not. Persistence is pestering. Just keep asking and asking and asking and asking and trying and trying. You told me no 3 times, but I'm going to ask a 4th. I don't care. And it's those students that probably really irritate the teachers. You know, I really do deserve an A. You gave me a B, and that's wrong. I deserve an A. Perseverance. When things get severe, they keep going. Tenacity is when new data appears, I'm able and willing to face that new data and say, okay, that means I need to change. I need to change this. And you keep at it until you get it right. Those are 3 qualities that are just absolute requirements at different times for an entrepreneur. How do you teach that? I don't know. Now, I want to talk about economics, and I'm almost done, and then we can ask questions, and I hope you have some. I have some very strong, in fact, I probably could have got a minor in economics because I took most of my electives were either life science or economics. So I took a lot of economics. I loved it. Oh, well, I need to go backwards here. How do I go backwards? The only thing I really want to talk about here is the only reason I was able to do ACT, well, there were lots of reasons I was able to do ACT. One, I was a fanatic. I built something for my own use, and it turned out to be a good prototype for what became a product that created a category that sold 6 million plus copies and is still a viable product here 28 years later. There aren't many software products that are still around 28 years after they were created. So it created a category. Where was I going? So I developed this prototype. But what was it that allowed me to be able to do it? There was a guy who had $100,000 who was willing to invest in my idea. As an entrepreneur, it kind of drives me crazy, this war on wealth. We all know that there's a certain amount, we all should be, you got to pay taxes. Taxes are necessary. There's things that need to be done that are important, necessary, required. But this war on wealth is, I read the story of a butcher who had his own butcher shop, and he was telling his son, son, and his son was complaining about, Dad, well, people don't pay taxes enough, and everybody needs to pay more taxes. And he said to his son, well, son, I never got hired by a poor person, ever. There's some value in the fact that I found a guy who had $100,000 that he wanted to put to work. And I was able to convince him to invest in my company. He bought 14% of my company. And 7 years later, he got $3 million back from that. $100,000 became $3 million for him. Is that fair? I don't know. But I know there were 200 plus jobs created. I know there was a lot of wealth created, and then that money was invested into other companies that became employers. And this war on that, yes, there are people who make, so much money and they don't invest in it. But you can't single those ones out. Otherwise, you're going to affect all the ones like me, because Jerry Jones, the Dallas Cowboys football owner. I met him once when I was in Dallas. He was actually an Entrepreneur of the Year, the same year I was an Entrepreneur of the Year. And we were talking, chit-chatting, and I asked him, I said, so, owning the Cowboys, is it anything like, like the oil business? And he says, well, it's different, but it's just as dicey. I thought that was interesting. He says, it's dicey. And we got talking about stuff, and he said, I got a guy who works for me who his job is to hide money from me. That's what his job is. He hides money from me, because if I know I have it, I'll spend it. I'll invest it. I'll do something with it. Every time I get extra cash, something, an investment pays off, or a company that I've invested in has done well and I get some money back, the first thing I pay my taxes. And then I started looking for, that entrepreneur I met with last week. I'm going to put $100,000. I'm going to put $50,000 in that company. Now, if I don't have that money, what happens? That company doesn't get built. It doesn't get started. It just drives me crazy when we talk about, gosh, it's just unfair that that people have more money than others. Well, sorry. I really am sorry, but if you want new companies, it takes money to build them. And if I hadn't have found that guy who was willing to give me $100,000, I would have never built ACT. I wouldn't be standing here today. It wouldn't have happened. And that's all I got to say about economics. The last thing, I think it's the last thing, innovation is very messy. When you disrupt something bad happens to something else. Henry Ford, he really did a number to the buggy whip industry and the carriage business and the horse racing business. He did a number on them. What should we have bailed him out? Should we have bailed out the buggy whip industry? No. I mean, look what happened. Look at the car industry today. There's, so many more jobs that were created from progress and innovation. But it's messy. It's really messy. Craigslist killed the newspaper business. The most profitable part of a newspaper was classified ads. And he figured out a better way to do it. And newspapers are closing all over America. Should we bail out the newspapers? They're talking about it. There is some talk about bailing out the newspapers anyway. It's messy. It's messy. And you just kind of, I think, we just kind of have to live with it, and eventually it'll work itself out. Now, there are people who say, oh, no, we can't do that. Oh, my gosh, the poor guys printing, in the printing business, they lose their job. Yeah, but dang it, they got to learn something else and, go start something, do something else. It's messy, and there's no way around it. There is no way around it. There's dozens and dozens of examples of one industry disrupting another industry. Look at Kodak. They were a Fortune 500, Fortune 50 company, and today are gone. Why? Because of Steve Jobs and people who put put cameras in phones. Who'd have thunk that somebody like Kodak could just be gone? Should we bail out Kodak? Sorry. Maybe they had some $2 billion worth of patents. They owned the patents on most of that stuff, and they failed to innovate. They failed to do it. So keep in mind, it's messy.